There are many ways to edit a photo in Photoshop, and there's the smart way and the not so smart way. The not so smart way is where your edits are actually burned into the image and you really can't undo those edits. I want to show you what that would look like really quickly. I'm going to open up this Photoshop 8 file by dragging it and dropping it into Photoshop, or right-clicking and opening it into Photoshop. Notice right now this is the background layer. Remember how earlier in this section I showed you how you can convert this to a smart object by right-clicking, converting to a smart object, and then we could apply the camera raw filter to it, which allows us to go back and edit this photo more easily. I'm going to undo that and say you didn't do that. This is not a smart object anymore. If I go up to image and go to adjustments, there are all sorts of adjustments up here, from brightness and contrast to hue and saturation. By clicking any one of these, a window will pop up and I can make adjustments with the sliders. So if I want to make this more contrasty and brighter, crazy bright like that, I can do that and click OK. But what happens is now that edit is burned into this image. So next, let me go in there and adjust the white balance. They don't have a traditional white balance editor, but they do have a color balance, a photo filter effect. Let me show you that one, photo filter. This way you can warm up your photo with different filters by choosing the filter and then adjusting the density. So if you want to make it warmer or cooler, you just choose the right filter and then adjust the density. You can even choose a specific color that you want to add as a filter here, like so. And then you click OK, and you're happy with that. But now you're like, oh, actually, I made it a little too bright. How do I go back? Well, you can't really go back and go to image, adjustments, brightness, and contrast anymore, because now this is a brand new brightness and contrast effect, which is not the right way, because if we adjust it now and try to bring down the brightness, it starts to get a little funky because it's applying multiple brightness and contrast filters or effects over and over and over. And that starts to distort the image. The only way you can go backwards in Photoshop is going to your history, which is this little button here, which if you click, it brings up the history window. If you don't see that, go to Window and click History. And this has all of the different things we've done so far to this photo. We opened it, we added brightness and contrast, we added the photo filter, and then we added another brightness and contrast filter. What you can do is click on one of these steps, and when you do that, you go all the way back to that step. But by doing that, you delete the later steps. If I want to just delete that brightness and contrast effect, I can't do that. There's a little trash can here that might look like I can do that. But if I click the brightness and contrast and choose delete current state, then it's going to delete that step plus everything after it. So the history option is a good way to go all the way back to the beginning, but it's just not the right workflow for editing photos. So the best way is to convert your object to a smart object. So this one over here, our soccer image, is already a smart object because we opened it up previously in Camera Raw, and Photoshop remembers that, so the next time you open it in Photoshop, it's a smart object. You'll notice that's a smart object because it has this little icon down here where it's the photo itself in the layer panel, and then there's this little icon in the bottom right. See how this photo of the water doesn't? If I right click and convert to smart object, it has that little icon now. Now look what happens if you go to image and then adjustments. Say we add brightness and contrast. We change the brightness, we increase the contrast, and click OK. What happens is a new smart filter is applied. Now we can go back and edit this brightness and contrast filter by double clicking it, making changements, clicking OK. If we go to image and adjustments again and add instead of photo filter, I'll choose color balance. We can add more red, make it more yellow. Actually, this is a good example of where you have your sort of standard white balance going from yellow to blue. It's not exactly like white balance, but it's close. So we want to make it warmer. We can do that, add a little bit more red, click OK. Now we have the color balance and the brightness and contrast filters. We can always go back to brightness and contrast by double clicking it. It's going to warn you that says that these smart filters are stacked on top in the same way that you add them or applied them. And so if we click OK, it's going to get rid of all of those effects so we don't see it, and we can adjust the normal brightness and contrast without seeing the color balance. You can reorganize the effects by clicking and dragging them around. So now if I adjust the brightness and contrast with it on top, I do see the color balance as well, so you can make the adjustment knowing what it looks like with the color balance applied. You can quickly see what it looks like with or without one of these effects by clicking on the little icon to the left of each of these filters, or turn them all on and off with the big smart filter eye right there. So that's how you apply image filters or smart filters using the images and adjustment window. There's another way to add adjustments to an image, and that's with an adjustment layer. And there's multiple ways that you can apply those adjustment layers. One is by going to this Adjustments tab up here. If you don't see that, go to Window and choose Adjustments. And now you have these icons, and these are similar, many of the same sort of effects as what was up here in the image menu. So if we choose Hue and Saturation, for example, notice what happened was we have this layer that appears above the photo, and then in the Properties panel, we have the sort of edits or the sliders for this effect. So if we drop the saturation, for example, we make it lighter or darker and make any changes, this is just a layer that is being applied to the layer underneath it. Now I want to show you something. What if I want to put this soccer photo, let's take this soccer photo and place it into this project. Clicking and dragging it. It opens it up in Camera Raw first, but I'm just going to click OK so that it creates the smart object on this project. I'm going to resize it, make it bigger. If you can't see your entire canvas, you'll use the zoom tool down here. First, we have to place this file, so press Return on your keyboard or press Place. Now with the zoom tool, you can zoom in or out. You can choose to zoom in with this button up here, zoom out with this button down here with the minus, or you can, with the plus sign to click and zoom in, you can just hold the Option key down to zoom out. So now it's a little bit easier to see the image and place it where we want it. Pressing the spacebar to get our hand tool allows us to move the canvas around itself, not the image itself. So now this practice photo 6 is on top of our other layers. If I put this underneath the hue saturation layer, the hue and saturation is applying to that layer as well. And so that's the difference between these adjustment layers and the photo smart filters here. It's that these smart filters that we applied to this photo down here are only being applied to this photo. The hue and saturation layer applies to all the photos or any sort of layer that's underneath it. Say we add another adjustment, which we can do with these buttons up here, or there's another way by clicking this button down here. It's like the little circle, half dark, half light. And choose, let's go ahead and add a black and white. That's going to add the black and white filter, and it's a new layer. And we have the same sort of adjustments that we have seen in the other lessons where you can adjust the brightness of individual colors in terms of your black and white image. But again, if I take this soccer image and put it above all these layers, and even if we make it smaller, you can see that it's not having these same filters being applied to it. If I drop it underneath, now it's black and white. And just to clarify one more time, if I have this selected and go up to Image, Adjustments, and now I go to Hue and Saturation, now this window is for the smart filter that's going to be applied to this image. So let's make it crazy saturated. Click OK. And now that smart filter is just on that image itself. So that's how you apply adjustments to your photos right within Photoshop. There's multiple ways to do it. You can still use these layers. There's nothing wrong with using these adjustment layers. Just know that it applies to all of the layers beneath it and not just that individual photo. You can turn them on and off. You can go back to them because when you click them, it opens up the settings in this Properties tab. So it's still not burned into it. You can still go back and edit them. It just depends on how you want to edit your photos. So my advice is to go through them and play around with the different effects. You'll find a lot of them similar to what we've seen in the past. You see the curves, which allows you to adjust the contrast and the exposure. There's levels and exposure, which also allow you to adjust the exposure. You've got hue and saturation for colors and saturation. And I don't want to bore you, so I'm not going to go through each of those one at a time in this class. But if you have any questions on a specific one, or if you're looking on how to do a specific thing, let us know and I'll get back to you and show you how to do it either with a new tutorial or through the questions and answers in the course. Thank you so much for watching this lesson on how you make adjustments to photos. In the next lessons, I'm going to show you some cool techniques you can do in Photoshop that you might be wondering, like removing backgrounds.